Our health is not just physical, but it's spiritual, deeply spiritual, and political as well. Because if you followed this year's presidential campaign, you know that health became a hot issue on the campaign trail. Today, we are interviewing Steve Wohlberg. He is a world renowned speaker, producer, and author of over 40 books related to biblical topics. And he is coming on our show today to discuss his new book called End Times Health War. You don't want to miss this episode as Steve tells his story and talks all about the book and things that you need to know about your health. Stay tuned. Well, Steve, thank you so much for joining us on Patriots Revival today. We're so glad to have you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Melody, and thank you for having me. It's
Yes,
my
sir.
privilege.
Yeah. So you wrote a book and it is called End Times Health War. I read the book, fabulous book. I loved the book, actually. I am so glad that you decided to come on to the podcast and talk about the book, but also we want to learn a little bit about you. So let's start out by maybe you sharing with us a little bit about yourself, your background, and kind of kick us off that way.
Sure, and I'm happy that you actually read my book. I've been on a lot of podcasts, and I think people often will just review, they'll look at the highlights and see if they want to have me on as a guest. But kudos to you that you actually read the book. So
Yes, sir.
that's exciting to me. So my background, I am getting closer to 66 years old. If we rewind back to my early days, I grew up in a Jewish home, which was it was a cultural, secular Jewish home, actually, in the Hollywood Hills of Southern California. My home was not a spiritual home. We went to our neighbors' houses sometimes for the Passover. We would eat Jewish food, lox and bagels and cream cheese and different things. But there was really no spirituality in my home. We didn't read the Bible. We didn't pray. I was never taught the Bible stories like about the Ten Commandments and the flood and Noah's Ark and anything
Wow.
like that. So when I got into my teenage years, and I've shared this many times with people, I got into the wrong crowd because that's all I knew. It was around me, surrounding me. I went to North Hollywood High School, LA Valley College, and I just got pulled into the Hollywood scene, the entertainment industry, the rock and roll, the movies, the parties, the concerts, and started using drugs and drinking alcohol. And I was what I guess the redeeming thing was that I was very active physically. I danced a lot. I played a lot of basketball. I went backpacking. So those things were good for my body as compared to the other things that I was doing that was killing myself. And then when I was in my late teens, or right around that, maybe 19, early 20s, I began to run into Christians in strange places. And they began to plant little seeds in my head that I should read the Bible. I should, learn about Jesus and think about what's happening in the world and that Jesus was going to come back again. And so at one point, I finally decided I'm going to do that. And my dad remarried from my mom. They divorced. So my dad remarried. I was living with my dad, and the woman that he remarried was raised a Southern Baptist. Although she wasn't practicing her faith at the time when she married my dad, but up in the bookshelf, up in the den of our condo that we all lived in, I was at the bottom floor, they were at the top, and then there was the living room in the middle. So I went up to the bookshelf and I looked at the books and I found a Bible. Anne,
Nice.
my stepmother, Anne, had a Bible on the shelf. So I picked up the Bible and I began to read. And little by little, I got to the New Testament and I read about Jesus and his suffering in the Garden of Gethsemane and his death on the cross for my sins. And to me, the big miracle was that the Holy Spirit helped me to understand what I was reading. into my darkened mind. And at one point, I decided to get on my knees and invite Jesus into my heart to become my savior.
Right.
And when I did that, everything changed. I just experienced a peace that was fantastic. And so that was the beginning of my Christian life. And years go by, and eventually I felt impressed to start writing books on the topics that I'd been learning in the Bible. I became a teacher and a minister. And um,
So did you go to seminary?
yes, I did at
Okay.
Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan.
Okay.
So I had 5 years of theology training, but I
Mhm.
really think that the most important things that I know as a result of my education was really just me and the Lord, studying
Yeah.
my Bible, getting to know Jesus, getting on my knees, praying for the Holy Spirit. This is what really opened my eyes, although my education was good. And another thing, as far as tying this into health, was that when I was a teenager and I was lost in the world of drugs and alcohol, for some reason, I started getting into health. In Southern California, there were a lot of health food stores around me. And so I started going into the health food stores and buying these, avocado sprout sandwiches at the buffet line and buying smoothies and tofu and healthy things. And I think I was thinking somewhere in my head that because I was doing all the bad things for my health with the drugs, I needed to offset that with some good things. So I started learning about health. And when I became a Christian, I laid aside the bad habits, but I kept the good habits. And
Good.
one of the things I really like to do is grow sprouts and microgreens in northern Idaho, where I live right now. It's very cold outside, so my garden is pretty much done, and my orchard's done, my fruit trees are done. But I'm growing a big tray of sunflower greens upstairs, and buckwheat and purple Rambo radish. And I actually teach a health course called Sprouting with Steve, sproutingwithsteve.com, where I teach people how to do this. And so as I continued on with my health journey, eventually in the year 2000, I found the woman that I was decided to marry, that God brought me to, my wife, Kristen. And so uh, after we got married, we moved to California and we continued on in our married life. And after 4 years, Seth came along, our first son, and then 3 years later, it was Abby. So now we have a boy and a girl. My son, he's now 20 years old, and Abby is 16. And what really motivated me more than anything, and I go into this in the book, End Times Health War, this was really a catalyst to take my interest in health to another level. And it was the nightmare of seeing Seth when he was 3 years old having his first seizure. He was in a car seat sitting in the back while Kristen and I were driving from a church event. And Kristen looked in the mirror, or she turned back around and she saw him convulsing in his car chair. So she said, "Something's wrong with Seth." So we pulled over. I pulled over. I was driving and then looked back, and it was the most heart wrenching thing that I've ever seen. My own little boy, you know, convulsing and twitching. So we pulled over, called 911. The ambulance came, took him to the hospital, ran a bunch of tests. And that began the journey of realizing that he had some kind of an epileptic disorder. And the neurologist that we were working with put him on medication, and the medication, he had a terrible reaction to this medication. He would wake up in the middle of the night with his hands over his head, over his ears, and he would just be screaming. And oh, it was just so horrific. And so we realized he was having a reaction to the medication. He's having a seizures. What do we do? So, and I was just praying for the life of me, God, please help me to find out how to help Seth. And then we found a physician that was a different kind of a physician. He was into detox and natural foods and testing the body to see what's going on inside. So he ran all these tests on Seth and found out that our little boy was loaded with heavy metals, with arsenic and lead and cadmium. And if you've read my book, you know all that, the drama of that story. So this particular doctor, Dr. John Mondal, who was practicing, I think he still is, in Spokane, Washington, he said, we need to do a detox for your boy. We need to put him on certain protocols and get these heavy metals out of him because that is probably causing his seizure. So the more we did that, we eventually got him off the medication. Uh, his health improved. He stopped having seizures, and that whole drama just really motivated me to. I'm not just thinking now about my health, but about my son's health, and that really just moved me into a journey to understand the body, understand toxins, chemicals, the environment, and what we can do to help our immune systems to fight these kind of things that are in the environment and whatever else comes our way. So as time went on, that's why I wrote the book,
Yeah.
was to share my research, to share what I've learned, to share Seth's story, and to try to help people to improve their health. And so hopefully they won't go through what me and my wife went through.
And I know, Steve, from reading the book that you yourself, and I won't give away too much in the book, but you yourself had some health issues, and you kind of cover that as well
That's right.
with your blood pressure, I believe.
That's correct.
And you were
Yeah.
able to identify kind of the root cause, and that's a big thing in functional medicine, and that's why I think the Lord must have brought us together, because I myself, in the last year I went to a functional medicine doctor and have become a lot more aware of the importance of treating the root cause, and not just what we see in traditional medicine, where they, like what they did with your son Seth, where they just give you medicine just to they're just gonna give you a pill to just treat the symptom and never really get to the root cause of the issue. And that's why I'm so glad that you wrote this book, because it's really opened my eyes. And then I love how you talk about your scare that you kind of had with your own health. Did you want to talk about that just a little bit, just to give the potential readers a little preview of that and kind of what you went through?
Sure. Yeah. And so the book deals with Seth's story and then how actually my whole family was tested for heavy metals, and we found out that all of our hair follicles were had quite a bit of arsenic and lead and cadmium, and so we were all in the same boat. And then later on, when I got into my 50s, my blood pressure was creeping up. I discovered that my dad had high blood pressure, my brother has high blood pressure, and that high blood pressure is something that I needed to deal with as well. So that motivated me even more to research, how do you bring blood pressure down? How do you optimize the body so that you can be on as few as possible, if any, pharmaceutical interventions. And like you said, a lot of people are just willing to take a pill rather than change their lifestyle.
Yeah.
And as from me talking and as reading my book, my training is not in medicine. I'm not a physician, but I don't believe you have to be to understand the body, to understand anatomy, physiology, the laws of health, the importance of exercise and rest and a good diet. And there's just so many things that are so simple that we can do. And I've studied also from some of the best physicians and people that are natural minded and who believe in finding the cause and treating the cause so that the symptoms will go away. And so the information is out there. People can do their own homework. They can do their research. They can become self taught and they can learn a whole lot about health that is really very simple, very practical, and that it can help them incredibly with their lives. And
Yep.
I'm excited about our new human health services man that's coming up, RFK, and
Yep.
the focus on making America healthy again. And that doesn't mean that I would necessarily agree with every policy or every conviction that Brother Kennedy has, but I believe that his overall emphasis that we are now in a time of not a COVID crisis, but a chronic disease crisis, and that there's so much high blood pressure, heart disease, cancer, uh, diabetes, the list just goes on, problems with the pancreas, obesity, and people are just fighting these things all around us. I mean, every
Right.
day, practically, you learn something new these days. My wife has a cousin who lives in the Sacramento area where she grew up, and this cousin of hers is fighting for her life right now with cancer. She's battling cancer, and my wife teaches at a Christian school nearby, and one of the people that teaches there, a Christian man, he's also in a hospital, and they had to amputate part of his leg and some of his toes because he's
Mm.
had blood clots. And so, we're all dealing with health issues to some extent. And as we get older, these issues become more acute. And so it just makes sense for us to learn what to do as much as we can. I don't believe there's any, guarantees in this world of sin. Anything can happen to people that are very health conscious, but there's a whole lot that we can be doing to lessen our risk, to improve our health, to strengthen our immune system, to strengthen the body. There's simple things like taking a walk and eating more whole food and drinking more water and getting a good night's sleep. There's tons of information out there about the basic principles of healthful living that people need to know about. So that's
Absolutely.
what I try to do in my book is explain these principles and also to share them in the context, like the book is called End Times Health War, that I believe the majority of my focus as a writer, I've written over 40 books, is dealing with prophecy and the end times and how Jesus is coming. And I believe we're in a battle between good and evil. And my book expresses how this battle is also going on inside of our bodies. It's an end times health war as well. I think, many Christians, we know that the most important thing to God is saving our souls. But the body is important too. And I do have a verse here that I like to read, and I'm sure you've read it in my book, 3 John verse 2, where John says, "Beloved, I wish above all things that you may prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers." So God's greatest concern is our souls, but he's also concerned about our health. The Bible
Absolutely.
the Bible says that, and the previous verse talks about the truth. Verse 3 talks about those who testify of the truth, those who walk in the truth. Verse 4 says, John said, he wrote, "I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth." So truth is in verse 1, truth is in verse 3 twice, and truth is in verse 4, and then verse 2 talks about health. So I'm convinced that it's the truth that we also be concerned about our health. So that's what end times health war is all about, and it's showing that Satan is after us in every way he can, and he wants to bring us to an early grave through habits that aren't good for us, so that we can't serve God as long as God wants us to serve Him in this world.
Right. And I think one thing that Christians forget too, Steve, is that our bodies they don't really belong to us. Our bodies,
Yeah,
and it says in God's word that they are a temple to the Lord. So
exactly.
I think we don't think often enough about if we're eating this food or that food that's maybe not necessarily good for us, or we're not getting physical activity and we're just sitting all the time and just being couch potatoes and watching television, and we're not drinking our water, but we're drinking sodas and things. We forget that, okay, we're not taking care of the temple that God has given us, that our bodies belong to Christ. And as you mentioned in the verse that you just read, his desire is for us to take care of our bodies, but to be in good health. And so I think Christians don't. I think we don't think about that. And I know myself. I love food. It has been a problem for me my entire life. I struggle with it. I love food. I love sweets. everything that's bad for you, I love. But as I've gotten older, you think about it from, and especially as a woman, you think about of it from a more of a physical aspect of, oh, I don't want to put on weight or this and that. And you go on all kinds of diets. But the older I get, the more I think about, okay, yes, that's important to look good or whatever. Is that important? Is it not? But taking care of my body so I can, again, it belongs to God and He wants me to be healthy, but also just to be able to take care of our bodies so that we can serve the Lord as well. If I get autoimmune disease or some illness that makes me to where I can't walk, or heaven forbid I get cancer or something and die an early death, and that may be what God has planned for me. I don't know, but I want to be able to take care of myself so I can serve the Lord in whatever way that He would have me do so. And that's why I want to try to exercise, get my water in, and eat whole foods, just like they do in biblical times. So
Yeah, I'm right with you. I don't even know if you're married and have kids or not. You do?
well, I'm married. Was not in God's plan for us to have children of our own, but I do have a husband. So yes, sir.
Right. So yeah, so you want to be able to be a good wife for your husband as long as possible. And now I am married with two kids, two
Yep.
children, and I realize how much they need me.
Yep.
And as I'm getting in, like I said, I'm almost 66, and I know that if I don't take care of my health as much as I can, then my kids could be without a father, and they need me, and I
Yep.
want to help them, and I want to help others. And so, like you said, to serve the Lord, our bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit.
Mhm.
Paul says in 1 Corinthians 10:31, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God.
Right.
And there's a lot of biblical principles that will help us with our health. And some people say, well, when it's God's time for me to go, I'm going to go. But there's a verse in Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 17 that says, why die before your time? So God's will is for us to live as long as we can. And of course, there's certain things that we inherit, there's genetics, there's certain things we can't avoid, but there are a lot of things we can avoid. And there are many practical things that we can do to lengthen our life. One of which is just getting out and taking a walk. I walk regularly, especially after I eat. Most of the time
Yes.
when I'm done eating a meal, if I can, I'll go out and take a walk. Studies have shown that if you walk consistently on a regular basis, you are lengthening your life. And
Absolutely.
and simple things like water. There's an acronym that there's an institution in Northern California, Health Institute, that teaches what's called New Start, the New Start acronym. And so the N in New Start stands for nutrition. The E is exercise. W is water. S is sunlight. T is temperance or self-control. Then A is fresh air. R is rest. And the last T is trust in God. So NEWSTART stands for nutrition, exercise, water, etc. And these are, some people call these heaven's doctors, God's physicians. And if people would just do more of these things on a regular basis, maybe just a little bit at a time, their bodies are going to respond to that. Their bodies
Yes.
are gonna bless them. And so just, taking walks, drinking that water, getting your rest, not overstressing yourself, trying to get a good night's sleep. These days, I go to bed fairly consistently around 9 o'clock, which is not what I used to do. I used to
Mhm.
burn the midnight oil, but I remember when I was a kid, a teenager, in my wild days, I was in a bathroom somewhere, and somebody had inscribed a little saying on the wall, and the saying was, "He who hoots with the owls at night cannot soar with the eagles in the morning." And I have never forgotten that. And so, studies show that the hours before midnight are worth twice as much for your body as the hours after midnight when you're sleeping. So
Yep.
sleep is a big part of our health. And there's just so many things, even just the simple act of chewing your food rather than just, swallowing things without chewing them. It's amazing what chewing your food can do when it mixes with saliva. Saliva is like a miracle liquid. It helps your food be more easily digested, and then the whole process brings the nutrients into your cells better. And the more work you do on your mouth in your mouth, the less work your body has to do. So
Yeah.
it's a simple, well-established principle: chew your food more. And I read a book not too long ago called The Compound Effect. And it was all about the compound effect of small, healthy choices. That as time goes on, these choices will build up and you will reap the benefits of small choices on a consistent basis that are good for your body. So I believe in that principle.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you were talking about the new start, Steve, if I recall from your book, you actually have some tips, 8, I can't remember exactly how you worded it, but those 8 tips that were when you were going over the new start that were very kind of tied to that. And that's one thing that I really liked about the book, that you had those 8 items in there that are very simple, that folks can focus on and get started right away. Some of those same things that you mentioned that I think are
That's right.
very
And
helpful.
the chapter is called Eight Weapons for
Big
Winning the
weapons.
War.
Right.
Right. So the whole book is not just dealing with health, but it's dealing with the context of the Bible and
Mhm.
the great controversy that we are in between Jesus and Satan. In John 10:10, Jesus said that the thief, representing the devil, comes to steal and to kill and to destroy. But I have come that they might have life and have it more abundantly. So Satan's not just trying to steal our souls and destroy our souls, but he's also trying to destroy our bodies. And
Yep.
if you look at the way cancer works, I mean, cancer is insidious. It can actually hide itself from detection, and it has almost an intelligence to work around the immune system. So it's a very insidious thing. And we need to build up the body and our immune system so that we can detect that cancer. We can fight it if we get it, and that we don't go down as another statistic.
Yeah.
So there's weapons that we can use. Paul talks about putting on the whole armor of God to stand against the wiles of the devil. And part of that armor of God and the weapons that we use are health weapons to keep us healthy and to resist the devil.
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to ask you a question going back to Seth and thinking about what happened with your son Seth and then your own health and how you sought out alternative means and with the doctor that you mentioned and you eventually got Seth off the medication. Wanted to ask you what your family members thought about that, and I don't know if your parents are still living, your wife's parents, your siblings and whatnot. H- how how did your family members handle that when you went to a non-traditional route? And I'm sure, because I get that from my family members too, of, well, because we're so conditioned as Americans, especially with big pharma, that you again, as we talked about earlier, you go to the doctor, you get on a medicine, and they're just treating the symptom. And then what I feel, you're in the system now. And so now you're going to be dependent on healthcare the rest of your life. And it
Oh
seems
no.
like, because we're not treating the actual symptom. And I think that sometimes people like you and me, if we're seeking alternative methods and trying to get to the root cause, even our family members might say, well, they're not really doctors, or do they really know?
No.
Because we've been so conditioned to follow traditional medicine. So I wanted to ask you, when you and your wife made that decision to go that route for Seth, I'm sure you had critics within your own family or friends, maybe. And if so, how did you handle that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, let me even back up prior to Kristen and Seth. When I was in my early 20s or maybe late teens, when I told my dad and by that time my parents were divorced, but when I told my dad and his wife, his second wife, that I was considering becoming more of a vegetarian and eating more plant-based food, they were concerned. So they sent me to the family physician down in downtown LA in a high-rise building. And I still remember, I only saw this man one time, and he was very overweight, and he was sitting at a big table with a cheeseburger and a Coke. And he was concerned that I was not going to be eating so much meat. And I, told him, well, I've just been learning about the body and I want to take care of myself. And he was concerned. And that was the last time I saw him. And sometime not long after that, the man had a heart attack and died.
Mm,
And so, that kind of gave me my first taste of
yeah.
how I need to ultimately follow my own conscience. Now, as far as Seth goes, um, my mom and my dad were still alive at the time when Seth was having seizures. Neither one of them are alive now. Kristen's her parents are still alive, but I don't recall my mom or my dad really being concerned that we had found a different physician because we lived a long way away from them at that point. My mom was in Southern California. We were living in Northern California. My mom wasn't really involved, or my dad, in the daily grind concerning what was going on with Seth. But I do know that, he had a neurologist, and the neurologist's opinion was your son is going to be on this medication at least for the next probably 10 years. And if he can go 2 years without a seizure on the medication, then we'll take him off. And so when I told him that we had found another physician and that we were going to go a different route, he wasn't real happy about that, but he wasn't the kind of person that would report us,
Yeah.
to Child Protection Services or something like that. He was a nice man, and he just said, okay, you have to do what you want to do. So he didn't really. We didn't have any major flack, but we did have a battle when Dr. Mandal tested Seth, and he told us that if we take him off the medication, that he's probably gonna have more seizures in the short term because that's the way his body is gonna respond to getting off the medication. And so Dr. Mandal told us, just hold the line, hold the line. I've done this before. I know what I'm doing. Hold the line. Don't panic and bring him back to the meds. Just give it time and give God time to work. And so that's what happened. The first couple of months were rough after we took Seth off the medicine. As time went on, his seizures became fewer and fewer, and then he got off of them. He wasn't having them, and he wasn't on the medication anymore. And so it just, took a while, but we were rewarded for our efforts. So it's almost like when you start making good decisions, there are reactions, sometimes from different people, sometimes family members, sometimes your own body says, don't do this. You need to go back to familiar territory. But we've got to, if we believe we're doing the right thing, and if we've researched our option, and if we prayed, um, we just have to hold the line and go forward. And we all know that, most of us know that, and I'm not against doctors, I'm not against physicians, but I've learned enough to realize that there are different kinds of physicians. There's different kinds of doctors, and not all doctors agree with each other. You mentioned functional medicine as compared to traditional allopathic medicine. Uh, just putting people on medication. There are doctors that's all they know. But there are other physicians that have done more of their homework on this topic, and they have other things to say about the body and about prevention and natural remedies, and not just going the pharmaceutical route. So it depends upon the physician, and that's where we have to do our homework, and we have to pray that the Lord will guide us and trust his leading.
So with that, if you if we've got folks in our audience that are watching or listening to this podcast, and they want to go away from the traditional medicine route and truly find out maybe they are suffering from, it could be something similar to what Seth went through or yourself or some other ailment, and they decide to go the non-traditional route. I guess I would ask for, what sort of advice would you give them? I know you kind of talked about how the doctor said hold the line, but what sort of advice would you give them when they do get pushed back? I mean, even for my own husband, and some of my own family members, I get a lot of
Mhm.
pushback, or not pushback, but just it's almost like they think I'm a crazy person. So
Yeah.
what sort of advice would you
Yeah.
give fellow Christians or even non-believers who want to try to get to the root cause, but more so, I guess, because we're targeting, mostly we have Christians in our audience, of between the biblical evidence, but maybe give some advice of how they would handle those objections by their own spouses, their parents or siblings or friends that may object to this path that that person chooses to go down to take care of themselves.
Yeah, I think of biblical principles. First of all, I think we should treat others with respect and love and kindness, even if we don't agree with them or they don't agree with us. Paul said in Romans 14, verse 1, let every man be fully persuaded in his own mind. And at the end of the day, we are responsible to God for our body temple and for our decisions, and we have to follow our own consciences. And that's where character comes in. God is looking for people that are willing to follow Him, though the heavens fall. And so we need to do what we believe is right and what's best for us and what's best for our families. So biblical advice would be, you know, be respectful to those that don't agree with you, but realize that you are accountable to God and you've got to follow your own conscience. You also need to do your homework. You also need to do your own research. And so you know what you're getting into. You're not just following some charlatan, who's giving you snake oil, but you've got biblical principles. And let me just illustrate this. Here's a practical illustration. I've always gone to traditional dentists. And I found a podcast some time ago, Dr. Ellie Phillips, who's a natural dentist. And I started watching her, and wow, did I learn a lot. And at the same time, I was going to my normal dentist, a regular dentist, not far from where I live. And I'd been going to this dentist for 14 or 15 years. And I was having some difficulties in one of my teeth. And so they did some x-rays and they said, we put a cap on one of the teeth and we need to uh, take it off and put another one on there. So right at this time, I was watching Dr. Phillips, and she was talking about the importance of finding a natural dentist. And she said, you don't pick a dentist because you get good insurance. You pick a dentist because they're the best really in their field. And there is a natural dentistry field. So I went online and I found about 45 minutes away from my house in Hayden Lake, Idaho, I found a Northwest Natural Dentistry. And so I thought I'd go there and have them take a look at my mouth. And they had a different kind of X-ray, a 3D X-ray, and they did a test, or they looked at me, and then they put the pictures on the screen there, the monitor, and they said, you have a very, very serious abscess way down underneath, and it's broken through your cavity, and it's actually getting into your nasal cavity. And if we don't get that tooth out, you could potentially have big problems. And they had what they call a holistic extraction. And they did it, and these people were just off the charts. I mean, they were very skilled, very good. Uh, and I realized to myself, if I would have continued on with my natural dentist, they never would have seen this. They never would have
Yeah.
known that at the very time that they wanted to put a cap on my tooth, there was actually an abscess going on underneath that had broken through the nasal cavity and was starting to, and so when they pulled the tooth out, they took it out, I could see the pus. They showed me, they said, look, this is right there. And so this is a simple example in my personal life, and this has only been in the last 6 months, that going to a traditional dentist didn't see, to use a pun, the root of the problem. They didn't see what was really going on. And in that case, I'm very happy. I've changed dentists. And so, sometimes dentists or physicians, people that you trust that have been trained in regular dentistry or regular medicine, they see things a certain way.
Yeah.
And not all those ways are bad. I'm not saying that they're all, wrong, but in this day and age, there's enough people that are out there that are continuing the research on what's best for the body, whether it's dentistry, medicine, health, a whole host of things. That it pays for us to take a second look or get a second opinion and try to find somebody. And if other people think you're crazy, well, people thought Jesus was crazy. People thought that
Yeah,
he
there
was
you go.
possessed by the devil. He
Yeah.
was casting out demons through the Holy Spirit, and they said, "This man doesn't do this except by Beelzebub, the prince of the devils." So, people can be set in their ways in whatever field they're in, and we have to follow our conscience. We have to pray. We have to do what we believe is right. Weigh the evidence. Do your homework, and then make decisions that you believe are best for you and for your family. And if other people don't agree with this, say, well, we're just going to have to agree to disagree, but I'm going to follow my conscience, and this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. I have to ask you, Steve, since you mentioned that you've switched to a holistic or natural dentist, are you still using traditional toothpaste or are you fluoride free? I know this has nothing to do with your book. I'm
Yeah,
just
well, yeah, that's interesting because the jury's still a little bit out for me on that. The natural dentistry, they do recommend a different toothpaste that I've been using, but Dr.
yeah.
Phillips, she's in her probably early 70s, her teeth are just gorgeous.
Wow.
She's got a big smile, and she was tested along with other dental hygienists and dentist. She was tested in Dallas in 2015 for the health of her teeth, and she
Wow.
won. And she got a free trip to Orlando because her teeth were the healthiest of all the teeth. So I've been watching her, and she recommends just a regular. There's a certain kind of Crest toothpaste that has a
Okay.
very, very tiny bit of fluoride, which she thinks a little bit is good topically on the teeth. Now, other people may not agree with that, but I have a lot of confidence in her. She's very strong on xylitol. She's got perfect teeth. She has no cavities. And she has a mouthwash system. She calls it her complete care mouthwash system that I've been doing and for about 6 or 7 months. And I like it. So at some point, maybe I will switch toothpaste. Like I said, the jury's not out for me on that. But
Yeah.
Dr. Phillips, Ellie Phillips, she's got a YouTube channel. She's very, very good, and she's definitely not into just traditional dentistry. And I have dentist friends of mine, that are in different parts of the continuum on this, but I do know a number of dentists that are very strong into natural dentistry as well. So we all have to, do our homework and make our best decisions. And so that's kind of a long answer to your question about
That's
what
okay.
people use right
It's okay.
now.
I
Yeah.
did want to ask you too. I know you mentioned our future, hopefully, RFK Jr., how President-elect Trump has nominated him to be over the Health and Human Services. And so because we know, we talked about how in your book, End Times Health War, we talk about it's being a spiritual issue and how we've also covered how we as Christians, we need to take care of our bodies since that's what God gave us, that they're a temple. But switching over to how this has now become a political issue. What are your thoughts on that? We as Christians know that it is a spiritual issue, but now, especially during this most recent campaign, that this is bringing to light RFK Jr. and his endorsement of President Trump and is bringing to light all of these issues and the importance of eating whole foods, drinking water,
That's
taking
right.
care of yourself. What are your
That's
thoughts on it now becoming a political issue here in America?
Well, I think one reason why it's a political issue is because it affects the big companies. There's a lot of special interests in this world that have a lot of money, and politics and special interests are interwoven together, and it's very complicated. And it's unfortunate that it's like that. But overall, I think that RFK Jr.'s emphasis on combating chronic diseases and helping people to become more healthy, getting out a lot of the junk out of the schools, getting out, some of the chemicals that are put into the food that are banned in Europe, but that we use anyway over here. I think anything he can do in that direction, just looking at the big picture, is an improvement to where we're at. And that doesn't mean, that everything he may recommend that I would necessarily agree with, but when I look at the big picture, I think he's definitely wanting to move America in a better direction than we've been going. And I've watched a different physician. I watched a Democrat physician and a Republican physician on a podcast, both talking about RFK, and they both, were kind of amazed that they agreed with each other and that they felt like, this can't help but be a good thing,
Right.
to make America healthy again. So they were both on the same page on that. And so that's my feeling that there's so much big interest, big agriculture, everything that's being sprayed on the food, big, you know, the businesses that are making all these Twinkies and all these junk food, and they have a lot of power. So the tobacco industry and the alcohol industry, and there's a lot of money and power behind these things. So it's unfortunate that this has become a political issue, but I'm not thinking along those lines. I'm just
Right.
thinking
Yeah.
it's better for kids to eat better food when they're in school. It's better for kids to learn that instead of eating apple candy, they should eat an apple. I'm all for people learning how to eat more real food instead of merchandise. The more
Yes.
real food we put in our bodies, fruits, grains, nuts, vegetables, seeds, legumes, in more of their natural state, your body is going to respond to that. I mean, the evidence
Yes.
is overwhelming that people who eat a more plant-based diet have more fiber in their foods, they have less colon cancer. Because fiber moves things along, where if you just eat only animal products and no vegetables and fruits, you're not getting the fiber that's going to move things along from one end to the other.
Yeah.
And so there's simple principles that are very well established by people that understand the body and understand health.
Yeah.
And RFK is a breath of fresh air. I mean, just look at the guy. I
Mhm.
mean, at his age, he can lift weights. He's got a strong physique. He looks healthy, and so I'm all for it. Let's move in that direction and start bringing people into an awareness that they need to follow the laws of the body, the laws of health, strengthen the immune system, which will help reverse, hopefully, the trend toward just living whatever life we want and then eventually ending up on pharmaceutical drugs. You look at these commercials, there's commercials that are all about
Oh,
targeting the kids for junk food.
yeah.
And then you have other commercials targeting the adults. You need this purple pill. And there's a long list of side effects. It drives me crazy. I can't believe it when I look at a commercial. I happen to see it, and they mention this long name that you can't pronounce, and then they give you all the reasons why this could kill you, and then at the end they say, "Ask your doctor if it's right for you." Ask your
And they're
doctor if it's
on
right for you.
and
It's
they're
insane.
and they're on every it seems every when you're watching the news. My husband and I watch a lot of sports, and it's every you can't watch the news or watch a sporting event without there being multiple pharmaceutical commercials. So,
Right, and I think
anyway.
Kennedy's trying to ban those because
Yeah.
they didn't used to be allowed to
Right.
be on primetime television, so he's working to ban those, and unfortunately, the pharmaceutical industry is very, very powerful. Now,
Yes, they are.
I believe there are times when a pharmaceutical intervention, and I'm not saying it's all bad. There are critical situations. There are certain situations where somebody may need an intervention. But
Sure.
I think it's much better to go the prevention route and the health route so that you don't need those things. But that's not what the pharmaceutical industry wants. They want
Right.
you to be on their drugs for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
And I can't help but think that the devil is in the details,
I
trying
agree.
to get people on a path that's going to make them addicted to these drugs when they really don't need to be most of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing I wanted to ask you when you were talking about plant-based foods, I love your chapter on microgreens and wheatgrass, and I'm a smoothie person. We drink a smoothie every day, and I have incorporated some microgreens into our smoothies every day. And thanks to your book, I
Oh,
am
wow.
going to be ordering like a microgreen kit. I don't have much of a green thumb, but I am going to try to maybe try to grow some of my own. One thing I did wanna ask you though, and what I didn't see in the book, you have some great information in there. What is the recommended amount, would you say, a person should consume of microgreens per day? Because 'Cause I'm one of those people that you just tell me what to do and how much, and then I'm gonna incorporate that. So, what would you say is
Yeah.
a great recommended amount, daily amount for the microgreens?
Yeah, I don't really have a precise recommendation on that. I do teach a whole course called Sprouting with Steve. The website is
Yeah, you mentioned that. Okay.
sproutingwithsteve.com. It's very inexpensive, and people can go on the website if they want to join the course. It's just not very much. And then they can get a login information where they watch all these videos where I'm demonstrating how to grow sunflower, buckwheat, rye, purple Rambo radish, all these different kinds of sprouts and microgreens. And so today, I had a whole batch of sunflower microgreens, which are just fantastic. And I
Oh,
had a
wow.
big salad. Sometimes I will just, pack in the Rambo radish, the buckwheat, the rye, the lentil sprouts, and it's just one big sprout salad,
Nice.
a living salad with avocado and some other seasonings, and it's delicious. And I think I want to get as much of these in my body as I can. Now, I do eat other foods. I don't just live on sprouts and microgreens, but especially in the winter, I'm growing a lot of them. And I don't think you're going to hurt yourself by just, you know, increasing the dose. I
Yeah.
don't think there's a recommended daily allowance of alfalfa or clover sprouts. It's
Yeah.
just like, how much broccoli do you need to eat a day? Well, I don't think it's going to hurt you if you eat a little more. Uh,
Yeah,
sprouts
obviously.
have, yeah, sprouts have tons of nutrition. There's no chemicals. You're not spraying them. There's no transition time from the harvest to the market. It's less expensive when you grow them yourself. You've got live food. You're getting a lot of nutrition. They're easy to digest. You get fiber. So there's a whole host of benefits. So, really the simple answer is just, load up. You
Yeah.
just hurt yourself by having big salads. You can put them on your sandwiches. What I like to do sometimes is I grow lentil sprouts, which can take about 2 days, 2 days to grow lentil sprouts in a jar. And then I put them in my granola. I'll put them in my oatmeal. I'll mix it with some honey or a little bit of maple syrup or some blueberries or bananas or strawberries from my garden. And you don't even hardly taste
Wow.
the lentil sprouts. They're a little bit like tofu. Tofu is pretty bland, and depending upon what seasoning you put on the tofu, that's what you're tasting. So it's the same with lentil sprouts. It really depends upon the seasoning you put in your, in your salad or whatever you add to your granola, and you hardly taste it, but you're getting a little more live food. So the idea, again, the compound effect, you do a little bit of this on a regular basis, and your body will benefit long term.
Absolutely. Well, and I love when I read that section, Steve, I've gotta say, as I was reading through there and you're saying, "I'm gonna tell you how to do this," I thought, "Okay, I don't have a big backyard. I'm not gonna be able to grow anything." And then when you gave all of these tips of you really don't need a backyard
That's
and you can
right.
grow it with some jars right in your
That's
home, I thought,
right.
"Oh my gosh, this is great." So, thank you for including that information because I'm going to try it myself.
You're
So,
welcome. You are so
yeah.
welcome. I'm happy
So
that you're
tell
feeling that.
everybody Steve, how they can get your book, End Times Health War, and how they can find you and get more information or purchase a copy for themselves.
Sure. Thank you. Our ministry that I work for, that I'm the director of, is called White Horse Media. We picked the name White Horse because in Revelation 19, Jesus returns on a white horse. That's the imagery of Revelation. He's like the holy hero who comes down to conquer evil. So whitehorsemedia.com is our main website. We do have a store. People can order End Times Health War right there. They can call. We have a toll-free number, 878-BIBLE, 878-BIBLE. We do have some donors that know that I'm doing these podcasts, and they've contributed to a book giveaway fund. So the
Nice.
first 10 callers who call our 800 number and say, hey, I heard you, I heard Steve on the show with Melody, and he offered the book as a free book. So I'd like to get my free copy of End Times Health War, and we'll send it to you. So we kind of say the first 10 callers, but if you're the 11th caller or the 12th caller, if we've got money in the fund, we'll send that to you as well. So that's the way to get a hold of us. We do also have a YouTube channel. They just go to YouTube and type in White Horse Media. Those that are interested, we have a Bible school, a free Bible school, whitehorsemediabibleschool.com. We have a lot of places where we're in social media, and our goal is to teach the Bible, to lift up Jesus, to help people with their souls and also with their health as well. So that's what we're trying to do, and the Lord's blessing us. And Melody, it's been really good being with you, and I'm just I'm tickled and touched that you read my book and that you're getting into sprouting. So
Yes, sir.
it's a good thing. Very good.
Yes. Yes. So again, that's why I don't believe in coincidences, Steve. Our pastor preached a while back on there's no such thing as a coincidence. It's God's providential arrangement. So when I was teamed up with you and read the book, I really feel like the Lord brought us together, not only for my own health, but, just to get this word out about what you've written in your book and to share the good news of Christ with others. So
Yeah,
thank
that's
you so much for
you're
joining
welcome. And
us.
I think you said you marked up some of your
I did.
in your book,
I've,
and
I've got, let's see. Well, I'm a highlighter. I went through and I was highlighting various pages and let's see, just all kinds of
yeah,
stuff that
great.
stood out to me because I'm kind of old school in that I will keep this book and I want to refer back to it and well now and okay, where was that? And try to refer back to it. So yes, I'm glad I have my own copy and I can refer back to it and look at whatever stood out to me whenever I was reading the first time, and I may read it again. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, that makes an author very happy. When I write a
yes, sir.
book, I pray that the Lord will help me as I write my books, and then to see that you've read it, you've marked it, and now you're starting to sprout. And
Yes.
that's just that's why I do this. So
Yes, and I thank you so much for being our guest this evening, Steve. Thank you so very much.
you're very welcome, and God bless you and your husband, your listeners, your viewers that are tuning into your podcast.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
That wraps up our interview with Steve Wohlberg, author of End Times Health War. And I really hope that this interview was eye-opening to you like it was for me when I read the book and even had the chance to talk with Steve about this. And folks, I really want you to understand that your health and taking care of yourself, it is biblical. And we talked a little bit about that in the episode. As I mentioned in our opening, that our health, it is not just a physical battle, but it is a spiritual battle as well. I want you to remember that and thinking of trying to take care of yourself. And our altar call for this week is why not get a free copy of Steve's book? He mentioned that if you call their number, which is 1-800-78-BIBLE, that is 1-800-78-BIBLE, you can get a free copy of Steve's book. And I will tell you, it's a good read. It's an easy read. I read this on 2 plane trips. The plane rides were like an hour and a half each. So basically 3 hours, I knocked this out, and it's a good read. It's an easy read, and it's very eye opening. And again, Steve talks about the spiritual battle that we are in, and even provides some great tips on how you can overcome this, and ties it all to the Bible, which we love here at Patriots Revival. So, altar call, call the number, get your copy of the book for free. And folks, we'll close with our favorite verse for Patriots Revival, which is Psalm 119:25, that says, "Though I lie in the dust, revive me by your word." Folks, dust off that Bible. Spend some time with God. He wants you to spend time with Him. He wants a relationship with you. Revive your faith and revive your inner patriot. That's all we have for you this week. I hope you have an awesome week. We'll see you next time. Bye.